So as I mentioned, our study was about photographs and human interaction in general, slides. And this slides is just talking about that how many subjects we have tried to test and how many images and images grouped into different, like for composition and leading lines. And then composition has 10 images, 5 follow the rules of third and 5 are randomly. And the other 10, it's about the leading lines, and leading lines also divided to 2, 5, and 5. 5 followed by objects leading the eyes, and 5 other using the human as an element to leading the lines. And then we had 15 participants, 9 for with art background, and 6 without, and the median age was 27. And this slide were explaining about the process, that how we conduct the test. So we expose every participant to a series of images, but images started with a dot and then a plus sign, which is randomly placed in any of these 8 positions. So these 8 positions just showing at the moment at once, but in the test moment, we just show one of those. And the reason we do that is because we want them to select the entry point of the image by themselves. So we don't dictate any of the entering point to them. We just let their eyes rest on somewhere randomly first. And then the last frame showing that there are 4 exit points, and in the middle was the image. So every participant were exposed to the image with a freely timing because we don't want any unintended gaze shift while they're looking at the image. So if they feel comfortable and done with the image, they would look at of any of those exit points and then tell us next image. So these reduce the unintended gaze shift while we were testing. And as we mentioned before, the pictures tend to black and white to reduce the color distraction as an element to be evaluated in this test. So maybe Kevin can.
The tools that we use in this study is a sensomotoric instrument, SMI, which is a high performance and high-end remote eye tracking system. The device features a 500 Hertz sampling rate, binocular tracking, and a large tracking range. And the software that we use in this test is too. As we mentioned earlier, there are 15 participants, with 11 of them are male and 6 of them are females. And the range of age of our participants are, the youngest participant is 20 years old, and the oldest one is 28 years old. And the median age of the participants is 27 years old. The questionnaire that we designed for our participants, we asked them about their artistic background. And this graph shows that 9 of them are with the knowledge about the composition. They are artistic background, and 6 of them not at all.
So basically, we are starting now, but about what's going on with our founding. So in these slides, I would like to explain a bit about what we are calling a good composition and what we are not. So a good composition, usually in photography, there are more than 9, or even if you want to divide, there are a lot of more. But 9 of the famous composition rules exist. But since we can't really conduct to test all of them, So we narrow down to only rules of third, which is divide the screen by 9 squares. And then at the conjunction of each 9 squares, there will be an interesting point of images. So these rules of thirds is one of the kind of simplest and the oldest rules that usually almost every photographer try to follow. But as we early mentioned, that are these rules really make image looks better or not in the human's eyes between the artistics and non-artistic groups. So here are 4 good samples of the images that placed at least one attraction or one element in the rules of third junctions. As you can see in the top left, there is a boat located is one of the conjunction, and in the top right there is a house and a hill at the background, and in the bottom left there is a bench located, and in the bottom right there is a lady located at the right spot. Based on our composition rules, that which is we usually divide the screens, and we think that is good. And as you can see in these slides, we select one of our images that, because of course the results are very, I mean, there are a lot of results, but we try to narrow down for this presentation to reduce it to at least one example for audience to see how people behave. So at the most left side, you can see the rules of third that it's layout on the image. And as you can see, the photographer intention was locate a lady on one of the junction. And then there is a very beautiful landscape. And again, I mentioned it's black and white because we want to reduce the colors attraction. And there is no other distraction. So in the middle, you will see a heat map that created from the, it's an average heat map created by non-artist people. And as you can see that there are 2 spots that attracted mostly the non-artist people, which is one of them, it's quite right. It's follow the lady, they look at the lady, which is it's on the rules, and based on the rules of third. And the other spot was basically the sunset that is there. But when you compare this middle image with the most right image, you will notice the artist people focused on almost only in the rules of third and not really looking at the sunset brightness. So it shows that artistic people, because they have a kind of like rules of third background in their mind, unintentionally they usually looking mostly on the interested spots than everywhere in the image. And when you look at below and look at the questionnaire result, you will find out that non-artistic people giving a more highest score by almost like 0.3 compared to the artistic people. So even though that they were not really aware that where to look, non-artistic people, but in their eyes, this image is more beautiful compared to non-artistic people. And as you can see, non-artistic people make more relation between elements in the image than than artist people. So this is one of the examples that we find when we looking at the good composition images. But in the next slide, we explain about showing a bad composition. So basically, whatever is not following the rules of third in our study become bad composition. As you can see, these images doesn't really have a strong point or a strong spot to lay on to be able to categorize as a rules of third. And here here is an example that studies shows that when we lay off rules of third in the image, as you can see, there is not really an interesting point to look. It's basically just a foreground, and then there is a horizon, and then there is nothing. So nothing to really look. But when you look at the heat map of average from non-artist people, they look at the foreground, and the artist people usually only focused again based on their mind background to the rules of third, and they look at the house, which is not really at rule of third, but the house was attract them. So it shows that artistic background again has an effect on their eyes behavior, because they were looking only at the right spots, not everywhere, compared to non-artistic. Non-artistic almost scan the whole image, but artistic people only looking at the local, at the focal points. And again, at the questionnaire result, is very interesting that non-artistic people give a higher image, a higher beauty average score to this image than artist people. So it shows that for non-artistic people, not really matter that you follow the rules of third or not. They usually scan the whole image, and they give their feeling or their assumption of the frame based on whatever is inside the frame. But artistic people, when they're looking at any artwork or any images, they usually only scan basically based on rules of third or any of the other framing or any other rules that they have been taught before. So basically, we can say that in composition, rules of third might not have really effect to make an image beauty for everyone, but it will improve the beauty of the image. So it's not necessary you should follow rules of third to make artwork appealing to everyone, but it could help. The next topic that we were going to show the results is the leading lines. So these images, it's photographed that somehow some objects are leading the human eyes to some points. So what does it mean? It means the artist try to lead our eyes by selecting objects as the leading lines, not the humans. You will understand more clearly when we go to next section of this. So these leading lines, as we mentioned earlier, is happening by non-human. As you can see, the most left-hand side, the brick actually creating some series of lines that pointing at the focal point of this image. And we use a path scan to show artist and non-artist participants how they react to this image, to these leading lines. As you can see, the artist, his path scan shows that the top of the bricks catch their eyes, and then it lead them to the focal point, and then again they back to scan the lines because it's appeal to them when they look at this frame. But in the other hand, non-artist person even not bother to look at the bricks. It doesn't really affected him or her. He just like look at the focal points and even maybe not notice that there is some lines going on. In this image, again, the topic is leading lines, but this time we try to do it with the human elements. So we want to compare, is human present in the frame would more effective than objects. So all these samples are, as you can see, there are humans in the frame, and the humans are doing some type of activities, or either looking outside or looking at each other or looking at some objects. So we want to see if this looking direction would lead the observer to some points. And then again, our observation was interesting that this specific image was supposed to lead the observer to the outside of the frame. But when the artist look at the image, it's exactly what this happened. So the artist was looking at a human head and then trying to follow their eyes and make a connection between the outside and inside the frame to see what's going on. But the non-artist participant mostly look at the object itself and only one time just try to look what it's looking out. And these results, there are some the same person with befores. So as you can see in non-object, here non-artist and non-human, it didn't bother to look at the object. But when it's come to the human, the non-artist try to make connection between outside and inside. So I think this is one of the effects that we notice, that if a human look at a human inside any frame, they are more feel connected than an object. So if a human trying to guide them to some points, they would look, or they would look at what they are doing. So a human in the frame more effective for majority of the people than objects, based on our observation. And this is